Hey guys, we're going over the balance preview that came out on December 15th. Okay, this is for the update in January on the 13th. They're giving us a preview of what changes are taking place. So, in general, the minimum defines damage has been reduced from 100 to 25. So I'm assuming this is for like very small day skills that like a lot in quick succession. So they want to like lower the defines damage of some skills, which is interesting. I wonder why they're doing this change specifically, but I guess they might go into it later on. Elementalist. Weaver's Land Spear dual attacks are receiving some major updates. Each of them will now augment the Weaver's next outgoing strike to deal additional damage in an area around the enemy, while also inflicting additional conditions or granting benefits to the user. Catalyst's launch auras trait has also been reworked to lean in more into the specialization combo theme, creating a powerful personal effect when you finish a combo. Okay, so they want you to combo fields more, which was kind of what made Catalyst like very hard at the start, because Catalyst, when Catalyst first came out, there was a build at one point that was doing around 50-ish K damage. And to execute that damage was very hard because to get the timings right for a lot of the windows, you had to make sure you were getting all the combos and that kind of stuff. It made the build actually very inaccessible, hard to do. Like it was at the time the class that you would play to like show off like your skill level the most. So like if you could do it, you could do insane numbers, but a lot of people weren't able to do that, which is nice. I think there should be builds that are like that can express high skill with like low usage, like errors, like space for error basically. Ether Renewal, the skill has now also recovers some endurance each pulse. Okay, so basically they want Ether Renewal to not only heal you, but also just to give you back some dodge energy, which is nice. Kind of an interesting choice, but that's right. Inscription. This trait no longer grants resistance when using a glyph and instead grants resistance when attuning to air. The resistance duration is decreased when the fresh air trait is also equipped. Okay, so that makes sense. It's nice that they're not locking you into using glyphs when you're using inscription, because I don't think many people use glyphs too much, apart from like glyph of elemental power or like glyph of storms. So it's nice that they're giving this a bit more like, oh, like you get resistance, but they don't want to make it too powerful, especially with fresh air existing, because basically you're just going air, you change elements, you get straight back to air, and then, you know, rinse repeat is basically the way it plays. Bountiful Power. This trait has been reworked. Gain charges when switching attunements. Add 5 charges, gain quickness, and increase strike damage for a duration. Okay, so they're reworking the trait that gives you increased strike damage for each boon you have, which is kind of sad. I think this might kill some builds. It might make it a bit harder for some boon DPS builds to upkeep the boons, because usually you would run the arcane trait line if you needed concentration, which usually falls in line with boon builds. So they might have to adjust some boon builds to make it viable. I don't think a lot of the Ellie builds were actually overperforming in the boon variety. I think the Alacrity was alright, like the Alacrity Tempest was alright. The what's it called? Evoker, I think it'd be tuned down significantly. So I think I don't even think it uses this, so that doesn't really affect the Evoker too much. And also gaining quickness and increased strike damage for a duration is kind of, that might be scary for PvP, I think. I think PvP might be the one that might be a bit scary for, but for the most part, PvE, you should have maximum quickness. And I guess they want to lean more into, would you even use this in PvE? Like, I guess you could potentially use it on Weaver if the strike damage is like high, but I feel like this is probably not going to be something that people use. I think what they should probably do is like gain increased strike damage while you have quickness. Might make it a bit more usable in PvE. Might be the only thing I can suggest. Weaver. Frostfire Ward. The skill now also causes your next strike to deal additional damage to enemies around your target and remove conditions from you. Okay, that's nice. They're basically making it a cleanse skill and dealing additional damage. Galvanize. The skill now also causes your next strike to deal additional damage to enemies around your target. All right, so these are all the spear changes that they're talking about. So they might be a bit repetitive because I believe the spear on Elementalist is very, very boring. It just is like, oh, it does additional damage. Every single one of them does additional damage. You'll see it like repeat here, additional damage. So they need to add some more variety to what the skills actually do, in my opinion. I feel like what they're doing is like a good starting point, but not quite there. Fiery Impact. The skill now also causes your next strike to deal additional damage to enemies around your target and inflict burning and bleeding to those enemies. Nice, adds a bit of condi damage. Interesting. Lutriate. I don't even know how to say that. The skill now also causes your next strike to deal additional damage to enemies around your target and inflict chill and vulnerability to those enemies. Soothing Burst. The skill now causes your next strike to deal additional damage to enemies around your target and heal you. Shale Storm. The skill now also causes your next strike to deal additional damage to enemies around your target and inflicts blind and cripple on those enemies. Alright, so these are all just the spear skills. That's alright. It's kind of like they're just adding a bit of flavor and a bit more usability to them. This might be relevant for PvP. I don't really see people using Weaver that much, so we'll see. Pyro Vortex increase the burning from the initial strike from 1 stack to 2 stack. From 1 stack for 2 seconds to 2 stacks for 6 seconds in PvP and World v World. Reduce the burning from the pulsing strikes from 2 seconds to 1 second PvP and World v World. All right, so just rebalancing this for World v World. I think they nerfed it at a previous point and they're trying to bring it back up because they haven't seen much Sword play. It's fine. I like the look of Sword in PvP. It looks cool. I think there is a few too many, like what makes Sword strong is there's a lot like invulns, dodges, that sort of stuff. But for the most part, I think it's good to see in PvP. It looks fun. Very entertaining to watch. Shearing Edge. To increase the number of bleeding stacks from 3 to 4 in PvP and World v World. Natural Frenzy. Reduce the cooldown from 15 seconds to 12 seconds in PvP and World v World. Riptide. Reduce the cooldown from 16 seconds to 15 seconds in World v World and PvP. Okay, so they're making a lot of adjustments here to World v World and PvP. I'm noticing a lot of these are like more condi damage, which is kind of interesting because I thought the sword was more of a power weapon. And then also they're reducing some of the defensive skills with Riptide going down in cost. Might be a bit good for like their survivability and a bit terrifying at the same time. Twist of Fate. Increases super speed duration from 1.5 seconds to 3 seconds. Staunch Auras. This trait has been reworked and renamed to Elemental Synergy. Gain an additional bonus when finishing a combo based on the current attunement. This bonus can be triggered once per attunement per interval. Fire, gain might. Water, heal yourself. Air, gain endurance. Earth, gain stability. I don't like this. It looks very meh. But I guess having the ability to permanently spam yourself with stability just by giving yourself an aura is a bit too powerful, especially in competitive game modes like PvP and World v World. They probably just want to tune it back so that it's more easy for people to be able to, say, for example, CC the actual catalysts, which I think is a decent change. Isn't that a good one? I'm not massively a PvP player. I might tune in. I might watch maybe, you know, some of the guys play PvP. Like I might watch Boyce or some of the guys play PvP, but I'm not really much of a PvP enjoyer myself. I got to plat a few seasons, but for the most part, like on 200 ping, you can get into high elo, but like once you start getting into the higher ranks of PvP, it becomes a bit obnoxious. And I'm just not that into it. Like I enjoy playing the game for fun, and once you start getting to a point in PvP, it's not so much fun anymore. Some people might find enjoyable, but for me personally, it's just not my fun. I would much rather just go do PvE, fuck around, have fun, you know, that way. I get more serotonin in my brain from redlining people. Basically just beat them on DPS while being boon DPS. Engineer. The engineer updates are focused on adjusting a number of underperforming traits. Firearm will see some major shifts with the introduction of new damage-focused Grandmaster traits, while Alchemy will get some additional tools for supporting your allies. Box of Nails. The skill no longer an ammunition skill and will now inflict Immobilize on the first pulse. That's pretty good. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, although I feel like maybe with Box of Nails, and maybe it's just me from like an aesthetic standpoint, I feel like Box of Nails should do more damage based on people moving through them. So like, I feel like it should make a puddle, and then as you move through the puddle, you know, it does more damage. So like, say for example, if you're stationary, you only get like, I don't know, like maybe like 1 or 2 stacks of bleeding. But if you're moving, then I feel like you should get more stacks of bleeding because you're walking on a box of nails. But like, it's probably not good from a balance point of view, but it's nice from like a what the skill is. You know what I mean? Pry bar. Increase the number of targets from 1 to 3. Alright, so basically just making it a cleave skill because it is a melee skill. That's pretty stock standard. I think most melee skills are like 3 targets on autos. Net shot, increase the missile velocity. Okay, so they just make net shot faster, more reactive. Well, not reactive, but like less travel time, basically. I guess for PvP, that's a bit scary because there's less of a reaction time for it. And there's not much of like an animation you can see in PvP. Like, if you're able to react to this, you're kind of goated. Overcharged shot, increase the missile velocity, same thing. Basically just improving the speed of it. That might be kind of insane. I feel like if you increase the overcharged shot, the missile velocity, I feel like the thing you need to increase is the knockback velocity. I'm not sure if they're able to do that, but I feel like when you hit overcharged shot, the speed at which they get knocked back is very slow. I feel like the knockback on Ranger, Arrow, like Longbow 4 is faster than what the knockback is on overcharged shot. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I feel like when you're knocked back by an arrow, like you would go slower than if you were knocked back by a gun. But I would like the two to like for the knockback to be roughly the same would be nice. And maybe make the overcharged shot pierce because it's kind of annoying that it doesn't, but that's all right. Backpack Regenerator. This trait has been reworked and renamed to Blast Zone. Create a blast finisher when you use a healing tool belt skill. Okay. So, basically, instead of regenerating health every second while you are inside of your kits, instead you will basically do a blast finisher when you use a healing tool belt skill. So, this is kind of good for a few things that utilize their tool belt skill for heal. So that might be pretty good, especially for heal supports, right? Because you're almost always running this on heal supports. So, but I'm pretty sure on like heal supports, you're almost always running bandage self, which is not really like a good tool belt skill unless you're like mech. So this might, would this proc on mech on the F1? I assume it should. So you might do a lot of CC on like mech F1, which is like the charged punch for heal mech. And you keep the healing tool belt skill when you play Amalgam. So there could be some interesting use cases for that. That could be like a softcore buff to mech CC. HGH. This trait now also grants Fury and PvE only. That's pretty alright. So I think that's the trait for pretty much elixirs. Yeah, increase the duration and grants might. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like might is kind of everywhere at the moment, and I feel like a lot more places that give might should probably give Fury as well. But that's just me. Chain reactivity. The larger barrier generated by the third successful trigger will now also be applied to allies at a reduced amount. Okay. So gain Barrier when successfully finishing a combo field with a leap or a blast. Every third successful blast now grants a larger barrier and might. Okay, so basically now this is just like more support oriented, also from the same trait line. So they try to make this trait line a lot more user friendly for like healers and that sort of stuff, giving it a bit more power. Because I think out of all the healing supports for engineer, they're underperforming. I think the only ones that you can kind of play is like heal quick scrappers, all right, but it's kind of undershone by a lot of the heal specs. Heal a Lakmech is all right. I think it shines really in HTCM. But apart from like HTCM or like hand kiting, it doesn't really shine in a lot of places. It's just awkward to use. Like you could play tank as like a heal mech doing maybe Greer CM, but you to do that you would basically have to lift up your mech and plant it on the group and basically just keep it there. But that could get like knocked back, CC. There's a lot of things that can like interact with your mech. Optimize activation. Increase the vigor duration from 2 seconds to 4 seconds in PvE only. So this is basically using toolbar skill grants vigor. I don't think this is that much of a change to PvE. I feel like for vigor is a nice boon to have on a lot of builds, but I feel like unless you're granting it to allies, this is not that great. And I do not believe that this grants to allies, at least to my knowledge. Yeah, no target. This is purely for self. Not that good of a change. I think if you want this to be usable, just make it that it grants it to allies. I think that would be a nice change, even if it's for PvE only. Kinetic battery. This trait now also grants increased strike damage when it triggers. Okay. Gain kinetic charges when using a tool belt skill. At maximum charges, gain a burst of speed. Okay, so not only are you going to get a burst of speed, but you're also going to get a burst of strike damage. This has some synergy with stuff like Scrapper that like when you gain super speed, you basically do additional damage. The same with swiftness. So it might be the case that there might be like a burst build that comes out of this, especially for like PvP mainly, but I don't see this being used much for PvE because you want to upkeep your damage buffs on PvE. Adrenal implant. This trait now also reduces the recharge of your toolbelt skills when you dodge. Reduce the endurance regen rate from 50% to 25%. Okay. So this basically endurance regeneration is increased. There is one build that I'm thinking about now that this might affect inside of a PvE context. I think the only one I can think of is potentially Condition Hollowsmith. Condition Hollowsmith, usually the Condition Hollowsmith build that is used is the one that uses the vent trait, where basically every time you dodge, you expend some heat and it deals burning around wherever you dodge. So it might be the case that people might use this for the additional cooldown on the toolbelt skills. So you might like see that come back into play, which I think would be nice. I think Hollowsmith really does need some love at the moment because it's just not performing well. I think Hollowsmith should be, out of all of the builds on Engineer, should be the highest performing build in PvE for damage. It's currently lost its niche. I very rarely see Hollowsmith. I did see one yesterday, but it was a very rare occurrence that you would ever see one, because almost every single NG spec does more damage or the same damage, but is a lot safer than what Hollowsmith is. Also, when you mess up on Hollowsmith, the drawback is so hard and so high that you just like lose damage. Like, I wish they would bring back the old school like burst Hollowsmith where you want to overheat, blow up, do some damage to the enemy, do some damage to yourself, and then it's like a big burst, and make it easier and more accessible for people to do that burst. Maybe increase the rate at which you lose heat when you do that so that you can do it more often. I think that would be a good change to that trait. Serrated Steel. This trait also causes critical strikes to inflict a bleeding and has been moved to the Adept trait slot. Okay. So I believe the Adept is the middle trait line. So that's pretty good. Bleeding inflicted has increased duration. Okay, so they've just added the critical strikes inflicted, and Engineer does a lot of crits and like power damage in a lot of its Condi builds. So this is gonna improve Condition Engineer quite a lot, actually. So what are our current Condi Engineer builds? We've got Condition Amalgam. Actually, have I seen? I think they are nerfed pretty hard. I haven't seen many Condition Amalgams. Condi Mech is pretty easy, nice, accessible build for a lot of people. So that might come back into play. Condition Hollowsmith might come back, which would be really, really good. I'm surprised they didn't say anything about an ICD on this. So it doesn't have an ICD, so it might be very, very strong. I think they might nerf this trait on release, but we'll see. Modified Munition. This trait has now been moved to the Grandmaster trait slot. All right, so this deals increased strike damage for each condition on the foe. This is a very, very strong trait, but my question is, what has been moved? Oh, wow, they're deleting Purity of Purpose. I'm jumping ahead. Yep, so this is moving to Modified Munition, Bleeding Away. Sharpshooter, this trait has been reworked and moved to a slot previously held by Modified Ammunition. Bleeding scales with power instead of condition damage, but also a reduced rate. Okay, so similar to the Inferno Tempest. Wow, that might be interesting. That sounds like a very interesting idea. I do like the change. I think it's nice for them to do this. This might open up some builds. What? I think it's Rune of the Crate increases bleed duration, right? So there might be some nice theory crafting you could do, but I think it's got condition damage. I don't know if there is any builds for engine or any runes that scale power and bleed. Not to my knowledge. So this might require a relic to really enable it, because Balthazar relic basically like enables the like the Inferno Tempest from functioning. Let's quickly have a look. Random side note. Because I do not believe there is one, but because like there's so few that are used. It's taking a little bit of a while. Equal and opposite reaction. This trait has been moved to the alchemy specialization, replacing purity of purpose. This is really sad that they're removing purity of purpose. Purity of purpose was a very nice build that basically, whenever you cleanse something on engineer with an ICD, you would convert it from a condition into a boon. This was nice for PvE. There's not many things in the game that corrupt or convert conditions into boons. They are very, very strong to be able to do that. This makes like a lot of things very strong, because obviously chill becomes alacrity. You know, like slow becomes quickness. You know, there's a lot that becomes very, very powerful. And I think in the competitive game modes, this was very hard for them to balance. But I think in the PvE, it didn't really matter too much. It was more usable to like, whenever your stuff got corrupted, to like convert it back and have less of a loss, basically. But obviously, having the ability to basically gain quickness and stability when you disable a foe might be very powerful in PvE. I think that might be more terrifying, to be honest with you. They might have to move that. Heavy Metal. This trait fills the slot previously occupied by equal and opposite reaction. Your critical strike chance and critical damage is increased against enemies below the health threshold. This begins against enemies below 75% health and further increase below 50% and 25%. Okay. Where exactly was equal and opposite reaction in the trait line? This is a Grandmaster trait inside of Firearms. Oof. but this is competing with strike damage percent for modified munitions. I do think that depending on the percentage of heavy metal, it will actually outperform the strike damage of modified munitions. And it's more reliable. So I think having a lot of conditions on a foe is really hard to do in some places. But condition, like critical damage multipliers, are very rare. There used to be some that existed on Chrono. For a time, there was one that existed for them whenever they inflicted slow. It would scale, because I believe the way that damage calculations work, to my knowledge, is that power, precision, ferocity is calculated. Then I believe it's strike damage percentage that is calculated on top of that. And then on top of that, I believe is the crit damage percentage. I could be wrong about those two, the order of those two, but you have basically the crit damage modifier, like multiplies those three stats. It's not like additive to the crit damage, not additive to the ferocity, which is very powerful. I think Engineer might be extremely strong after these changes. Depending on the percentage that they add to heavy metal, I would be very scared to see what this looks like. Although that being said, okay. Modified munition. You'll have both? Oh, wow. Oh, you're right. Grandmaster Minor trait. Wow, that is going to be insane. That is going to be a lot of damage. Like a lot. Damn, Power Engineer is going to absolutely slap next patch. Yo, we're going to be hitting some good numbers in Fractal, RB. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be good. We're going to be pumping some insane numbers. Especially having an execute is kind of terrifying. Okay, Guardian. This update is focused on the Zeal specialization, moving the Symbolic Avenger trait to the Minor trait slot to make room for the new Grandmaster damage trait. We've also updated Zealot's Resolution into a more reliable trigger and introducing a new defensive option in the Master tier. Virtue of Courage and Shield of Courage will both always break stun for the Guardian to reduce their reliance on the Virtue specialization for the survivability. Okay. So basically you had to run a trait always on Virtue of Courage to break stun, which is your F3. So now they're just making a baseline on Virtue of Courage. I don't know if this is going to work for all versions of Guardian. So I don't know if this is going to mean Shield of the Event. Never mind. So it works for Dragon Hunter. But it looks like they didn't do it for Firebrand. So opening Tome F3. It looks like they didn't do it for Luminary, using your F3 there. So there is still some weakness there to some of the other elite specializations. But for the most part, it looks good. Zealot's Resolution. This trait now triggers when striking an enemy that is under the health threshold instead of when you are struck below the health threshold. Cost less the symbol of resolution when you are struck below the health threshold. Okay, that's probably going to make it more reliable for DPS. I do like the idea. I think Zeal is pretty much always used. I think if you ever drop a DPS trade line on Guardian, you're dropping... What is it? It's not Zeal, it's the other one. You're dropping Radiance. Like, you're dropping Radiance for, I think, Virtues. Radiance gives the crit, Virtue gives the damage multiplier whenever you basically have Aegis. Symbolic Avenger. This trait has been moved to the Grandmaster Minor traits to replace Symbolic Power. Okay, what's happening to Symbolic Power? That's interesting. So symbols deal increased strike damage. So they're increasing the damage from symbols. This is very strong and probably why people only ever run Zeal. It's going to be interesting to see. Like a 30% increase to them is a lot. It's going to be interesting to see what they do baseline, but we'll just have to see what they do with them. Furious Focus. This trait has been moved to the Grandmaster tier slot previously occupied by Symbolic Avenger and has been reworked. This now increases a player's strike damage and movement speed while under the effects of Fury and creates a lesser symbol of the blades when activating the first Virtue skill. Okay, that is nice. So basically, when you activate your F1, you're going to get a symbol on the ground. Okay, and then also when you're striking foes, you're going to put a symbol on the ground. That's kind of terrifying. So, but they've reduced the damage of symbols by effectively 30%. Renewing Splendor. This trait now fills the master tier slot previously occupied by Furious Focus. Heal yourself when you create a light field or finish a combo in the light field. I don't know if this is a buff, Carrot. Like, this is enough to do it, I think. Because losing symbolic power is like a big nerf. Like, where is symbolic power going? Do you even run this? I don't actually, wait. Yeah. Your strike damage is increased whenever your symbols hit a foe. Okay, no. So you always run the symbolic Avenger, okay? But symbolic power basically increases the damage that the symbols deal. Okay. So I think it's going to be interesting. You're always going to have this. We deal increased strike damage now. So you're not losing that damage multiplier. But this might give you a bit more flexibility. So you might be able to run the... You're not going to run Eternal Armory because this does additional costs and burns foe on their first strike. It's kind of meh. Shattering Aegis is interesting, right? Whenever you block an attack, you gain Mystic Rebuke, right? It's kind of meh. So like now all the Grandmaster traits are kind of meh. You know what I mean? Like I think the only damage one that you have is Shattering Aegis, which makes you want to get hit more and like apply Aegis, but you don't really apply Aegis enough to warrant the usage. So I think they need to work on the Grandmaster traits. I don't think there's any that really like stand out because this here is like an insane skill. Moving into the minor Grandmaster is good because it means you have more flexibility, but these ones just aren't really good flexible options. Dragon Hunter, Shield of Courage. The skill now breaks stun. That's good. So similar to the Virtue of Courage. It's a nice change. I do agree with it. Symbol of Energy. The projectile fired by the skill is now unblockable. Fire a slow arcing arrow that explodes on impact and burns targets and sears a symbol of energy into the ground. All right, nice. So sorry about that. All right, the Guardian changes. I'm not sure if that's going to be an overall nerf, but I think they need to rework some of the Grandmaster trait lines because I feel like it's just not that interesting inside of Zeal for like a final Grandmaster choice. But I think Anet might adjust that at the end. The Renewing Splendor is kind of meh. Like, heal yourself when you create a light field or finish a combo with a light field. Like, you do create a lot of light fields with the symbol. So you're going to be a lot more, like a lot easier to sustain on Guardian, but I think they just need to like rework the other skills. I think if I had to pick one that you would nerf would be Eternal Armory. I think nerfing or not nerfing or reworking and adjusting Eternal Armory would be a good choice. Maybe to make it Spirit Weapons deal more damage or something along those lines might be a good choice. I don't know. Mesmer, guys, the one we've been waiting for. So, I heard they did some nerfs, okay? And I saw people posting on the Reddit, oh, Chrono's dead. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's see what they've done to the best in slot healer at the moment, okay? Mesmer's changes for this update are focused on readjusting. Dude, I'm like reading that as readjusting. Where Chronomonster's power lies, improved alacrity is an iconic Chronomonster trait that houses significant parts of the power, fantasy, and strength of the elite specialization. Improved alacrity's functionality is being rolled into a minor trait so that Chronomonster has a larger trait variety while keeping the feel of its gameplay. This is what... No, that's not what makes improved alacrity feel like Chronomonster, feel like Chronomonster. Chronomonster feels like Chronomonster for Continuous Split. No one functionally feels the difference of improved alacrity. No one. But it makes the heal Chronomonster so much stronger than any other heal spec you can make on Mesmer. Troubadour will never work. Okay, they have to either remove Continuum Split or improved alacrity. And basically now they've made improved alacrity baseline. Which is kind of just like, yikes. Like, it's just not... Like, this was not... Like, dude, if I... Like, all of the times I've advocated for them to make changes to Chrono, it has either been to nerf Continuum Split or to nerf improved alacrity. Instead, they make improved alacrity like baseline. Nah, bad choice. It's not gonna. This nerfs. It's not a good choice for Chrono, in my opinion. Signet of Humility. Reduce the cooldown from 60 seconds to 45 seconds. Reduce the Defiance damage from 600 to 350 in PvE only. This is good. Signet of Humility was broken. Chrono Monster could do insane instant breakbar damage because of it. Making it where they can use it more often and nerfing the amount of Defiance damage it deals is probably healthy. I'm going to be honest with you, they probably could have just nerfed the Defiance damage and left the cooldown the same. Since, you know, it does a lot. But I don't think this is a bad change, really. Because Chrono just, you know, it doesn't have any weakness at the moment. And its insane CC just pushes it over the edge. Phantasmal Sharpshooter, so that is your Rifle 4. Reduce the ammo count from 2 to 1 in PvE only. Okay, so basically now you only have one Phantasmal Sharpshooter. But not a bad change. I think having the stacks of it made it really strong. I don't think this really changes too much with Chrono, apart from like stockpiling your CC, really. So you kind of just spam your 2 and your heal skill to generate clones, and your Rifle 4 you kind of just use whenever it's at max stacks to basically upkeep your boons. Mental Collapse. Reduce the stun duration from 3 seconds to 2 seconds in PvE only. Oh, they're really hitting Chrono's CC. Like, they're hitting all of Mesmer's CC, actually. So this is the Spear 5, which only does CC, I believe, if you have used the 2. So you have to have Clarity. So yeah, Empowered Stun is 3 seconds. Now they're nerfing it down to 2. I don't think I would use the Spear now apart from like mobility. And yeah, I guess it's a good nerf, but I don't know. Illusionary Inspiration. Reduce the outgoing healing modifier from 15% to 10 to 5% in PvE and World v World. From 10% to 5% in PvP. Oof. Dude, they just nerfed every heal Mesmer build by about 10%. Yikes. Dude, you're gonna actually have to run healing percentage like relics now on Chrono because it doesn't have much modifiers for healing percent. It's kind of yikes. Like, it's a bit less than this because almost always on a heal build you're running Transference anyway, which is about 10% healing. So by default, you're probably going to be sitting at about 15% effective healing modifier. But this is still a nerf to like all of the Mesmer builds, and I think that the heal builds in general, I don't think that the other ones were overperforming. I think the only one that was overperforming really was Chrono. But Chrono is just so strong that we were never able to basically see the other ones really shine. So it's just kind of disappointing. Well of Precog increased the cooldown from 30 seconds to 60 seconds in PvE only. Precog well is broken. It is way too strong of a skill. This is good. This would basically just make it so you can't use it all the time in places like... Damn, that nerfs it very hard. Because you used to just run Well of Precog inside of Deimos CM, and it was the safest skill to use for Deimos CM. However, now, even with improved alacrity, I do not believe you can use it all the time. Because Precog, you need it to be 30 seconds to be able to use it every time Deimos uses his Mind Crush. So now you can't. You actually would need to do it more. On top of this, now to be able to do the Mind Crush, like, it's less reliable because you have to channel your stability skill. I think this is probably a good change, honestly. Like, Well of Precog was way too strong for the cooldown that it had. The Mind Crush is timer based. Deimos goes through a rotations of attacks, and I believe it takes him about 30 seconds before he does the next Mind Crush again. Well of Serenity. Reduce the day's duration from 3 seconds to 2 seconds at PvE only. Yeah, they're just hitting all of the CC. Well of Gravity. Reduce the knockdown duration from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. Yeah, they're hitting Chrono a lot. I still don't think it's enough. The base kit of Mesmer is strong enough. Improved alacrity still makes it even stronger. So I don't think this is good. Danger Time. This trait no longer increases critical strike damage against enemies afflicted by slow, and instead grants critical strike damage bonus when you inflict slow on an enemy. How often does Mesmer inflict slow? Quite a lot, actually. Your F3 does it. This might be good for Power Chrono, but I don't see you being able to upkeep Danger Time enough to effectively utilize this. It's a pity they didn't keep it that whenever you have slow on the foe, but that's fine. Because basically we just comp around it. Improved alacrity. This trait is now being replaced by Time Bomb. Enemies struck by Time Sink are affected with a Time Bomb. Time Bombs increase your strike damage dealt to the target and explode when they expire. Okay, so basically, when you F3, it's not only going to CC, but it's going to add like a secondary effect, like an explosion, that increases the strike damage you deal for a period of time, and it explodes when it expires. Damn, that's really cool. I really like the concept of this. I do like the effect of this. This is going to be very interesting to see. It looks like Power Chrono is going to be very strong. I don't know if you would run Time Bomb over Danger Time. But they remove the crit strike damage, which is kind of very strong on Danger Time. So it's a bit interesting. We'll see how it plays out. Time Watch is on. This trait no longer reduces the duration of incoming movement impairing condition, and now increases the effectiveness and alacrity to you. Is this not... Okay, yeah, so they're basically just moving improved alacrity into this trait, which is okay. Still too strong in my opinion. We'll see what happens. Anet's probably going to nerf it further. I still don't see... Like, the thing is, I still don't see anyone playing Heal Chrono, like Heal Troubadour over Heal Chrono. Like, I guess Sealed Troubadour does have better CC now, maybe, potentially with the F3. But it's still delayed. Overall, I still think Chrono's going to be an S-tier healer. Its CC is just going to be a bit less. Necromancer. For this upgrade, Necromancer's changes are focused on the Spite specialization and Greatsword weapon. With shuffling some traits in Spite and new effects aim to provide different ways to play with the specialization. Greatsword changes will increase personal survivability in order to incentivize more Greatsword use by damage builds and less supports by World v World. Okay. Spiteful Renewal. This trait has been moved to the Blood Magic specialization and renamed Blood Renewal, replacing Blood Bond. Alright. So basically that was costing the lesser signal of vampirism when you do a certain number of bleed. So consume conditions to gain health when you use a healing skill. Okay, nice change, I guess. Miscellaneous Swarm. This trait fills the adept slot previously held by Spiteful Renewal. Cost lesser Signal of the Locust when you use your healing skill. Okay, I think Signal of Locust. I can't remember what it does. So the active, strike or remove boons from nearby foes, heal yourself when you strike for each boon removed. Okay, so basically just makes that whenever you pop a heal, you do an AoE boon removal. Interesting trait choice. I don't have any real issues with it. Awaken the Pain. This trait has been moved to the Master's minor slot, replacing Death's Embrace. And it no longer causes Might to grant less condition damage. Okay. So this basically means whenever you run Spite, you will always have additional power damage from Might. So this increases strike damage while down, inflict vulnerability when you strike a foe below the health threshold. Okay, this basically means you're going to have less reliable way of applying vulnerability. And you won't do as much damage when down. So Necromancers, when they're down, if you're 1v1ing a Necromancer and you're both down, the Necromancer's always winning. Not only does attack heal them, but they have more damage because of Death's Embrace. So it's probably a good change. You don't really want people to be like downstating for DPS, but Spiteful Fortitude. This trait now fills the Master tier slot previously occupied by Awakened the Pain. Gain vitality based on your power. Gain life force when you strike an enemy below 50% health. So a lot of people don't realize this, but Necromancer actually scales with vitality. Vitality, when you increase your vitality on Necromancer, you increase the amount of life force cap that you have. So the amount of life force that you have total. All of the skills on Necromancer are based on a percent, will give you a percentage of your life force. So by increasing the maximum, when you gain that percentage, the amount that you gain effectively is more because it doesn't increase the drain of that percentage. It still drains at the same rate. So you just will have more energy generation, which is good. I think it might make Necromancer a lot tankier because Necromancer is already one of the tankiest builds. And it is the tankiest build in light armor because it gets the most effective baseline HP. And basically now you're just slamming more HP on top of it, which is not bad, but yeah, mixed feelings about it basically. Dread. This trait now grants a short bonus of outgoing strike damage when inflicting fear on an enemy and no longer reduces the recharge of the third Death Shroud skill when killing an enemy. Okay, that is a nice trait. So basically, increasing your strike damage whenever you do fear is going to be good for a lot of the classes. You know, every time you basically go into Reaper Shroud, you use the F3. I think you might struggle to upkeep this, but it might make it that you can get higher burst windows on the class, which might make it more effective in places like fractals and them. This might bring Staff back a bit, but I think Staff is just kind of in an awkward spot at the moment on power builds. Death Spiral. This skill no longer grants life force and instead steals life from enemies that it strikes. Reduce the power coefficients in PvP and World v World, and reduce the aftercast by 0.2 of a second. That's good. Removing the aftercast is a bit annoying because a lot of playing Necromancer effectively is basically cancelling aftercasts. Nightfall. The skill now only converts boons to conditions and blinds the enemy on the initial strike. Reduce the pulse interval from 2 to 1. This skill now also grants protection to the Necromancer and grants life force to the Necromancer every interval if they're inside of the area. So they said they wanted to basically make the greatsword used a bit less by supports, but I think making it grant protection is going to make it so it's used more by supports. You basically just made it stronger. Pulse Blind is very strong. It doesn't look like there are... Oh, no, but it's no longer pulsing blind. It's just the initial strike that blinds. I think that's a healthy change, but you do give a bit of protection access to the Necromancer. I think this is a very strong buff to Reapers and Ritualists. They're going to be a lot tankier in open world because they're going to be applying a lot more protection to themselves. Like, they were already very tanky and very strong, but this only is going to make them more self-sufficient and stronger. Like, pretty good to have in a group, honestly. I wouldn't mind having one when, you know, you're going down Lamb, stuff like that. It's pretty good. Necromancer, unfortunately, it suffers from an issue where the worse your group is, the better you're going to perform because you're less reliant on the group for boons. Reaper provides itself with quickness, even on the DPS build. I do wish that they looked at potentially adjusting Blighter's boon on Reaper. It's not really a used trait. I hope they go back and basically give it some usage, some niche use case. Grasping Darkness. The skill now also grants quickness to the Necromancer if it strikes enemy. That's kind of terrifying for PvP and World v World because now you're basically gonna pull someone and then you initiate your bursts. You know, you get some quickness and then you, boom, you pop your skills. That's kind of terrifying. Ranger. Beast Mastery has historically been a specialization balanced around the Soul Beast Elite specialization. Our goal for changes to Ranger in this update are to improve both its gameplay, fantasy, and the viability of non-Soul Beast Rangers. Additionally, many of the bonuses to Greatsword from the two-handed training trait are being rolled into the weapon to make it more usable in builds without Beast Mastery. I think that's a good change. I think it kind of sucks when you've got like bonuses to weapons that are locked behind that. Like having weapons that are basically only really viable for power builds when you're running a specific trait line. Greatsword was unfortunately one of those. I love the Greatsword weapon on Soul Beast. It was really fun when it works, but it's not really worth it. Slash, increase the power coefficient from 0.8 to 0.88 in PvE only. Slice, increase the power coefficient. Injury and swing, increase the power coefficient. Maul, increase the power coefficient. All of the attacks basically in Greatsword just had their power coefficient buffed. Good change overall to the change of sword. Basically frees up Beast Mastery to have a bit more in it. Pack Alpha increases the attribute bonus from 150 to 300 PvE only. This increase no longer applies to the merged Soul Beasts. This is kind of rough. I think Soul Beasts is gonna get hit pretty hard with this unless they make changes, which Looking here, there's no changes to Soul Beast. You will probably still play Soul Beast because Soul Beast, I believe, will still outburst the Gale Shot. But overall, it's kind of scary. Loud Whistle increases strike damage bonus from 10% to 15% in PvE only. While your health is above the threshold, your pet deals additional strike damage. Your pet swap gains recharge reduction. Okay, so they're basically making it so that you can use your pet a bit more and increasing the pet's damage itself. Honestly, overall, I don't really have an issue with it. It seems to be a good change. I don't see people... Oh, fuck, sorry. Running Beast Mastery over the other trait lines. The other ones are pretty good. But we'll see. So, two-handed training is being removed and replaced by Bestial Rage. Gain Might and Fury when you disable a foe. Pretty standard average ability. Natural Healing, this trait has been moved to the Adept tier and replacing Potent Ally. Potent Ally, you and your pet each grant might to the other when critically striking a foe. This is just a nice passive might generation. Whenever you're playing Soul Beast, you would just permanently give yourself might. And basically this is now just you recover health at every interval. It's alright. Honed Axes. This basically gives you ferocities and axe skills, then reduce recharge. This is now being moved into the master trait, replacing natural healing. Ooh, this now no longer grants extra base ferocity will merge to Soul Beast. Oh, they're hitting Soul Beast on a few numbers. Like they get nerfed stats from Pack Alpha. And they're also no longer getting the Loud Whistle. Okay, that's like a 10% nerf. And now they're not getting Honed Axes. They're losing the ferocity bonus. Dude, Soul Beast is getting hit like with a fucking stray, dude. Like outside of Fractals, you never really see Soul Beasts, right? And the only reason you see Soul Beasts in Fractals is because their initial burst with Sikkim is insane, okay? So now it's pretty like I'm pretty sure now you would just like replace them with like Dragon Hunters, right? Or you would run Gale Shot. But for Gale Shot to work, I think you need like, I think a 5 or more second window burst to make the most out of Gale Shot. So it might just be the case that people are just going to move over to Gale Shot. Ranger specs are strange. Ranger is a very good middle of the road DPS spec. Very safe, very simple, good for people that are learning the game. You've got Shortbow, Condi, Soul Beast, very good for new players learning raids and stuff. Very tanky, good survivability, great thing to learn on. Power Soul Beast, it's kind of you execute your burst or your damage is trash. It is S tier in Fractals. The better your group is, you will see people running this. Basically now, as Carrot said, rip Ample. Alright. We have 2 Soul Beasts in our Fractal static. I think after these changes, they're probably going to have to change. I don't see Soul Beast being that good. I think probably DH might be the play, or Engineer, which is getting buffed, baby. So we'll be playing some Engineer. It's going to be good. We're kind of quickness jailed anyway, so it doesn't matter. Resounding Timber. This trait has been reworked. It now causes you to copy boons from yourself to your pet when you use a command skill. If you are merged Soul Beast, extend the duration of boons on yourself instead. So basically, yeah, whenever you apply boons, commands apply additional boons around you. Okay, interesting. So you copy the boons to your pet. Your pets are going to be doing some crazy damage if you're running some command skills, right? I think they want the fantasy of like, oh, you and your pet are both doing the damage. Like, I get it, but like, they really need to fix the pet AI to make this worth it. But anyway, Go for the throat. This new Grandmaster trait, replacing honed axes. When you strike an enemy with a beast skill, cast a lesser sick'em on them. Okay, so they're basically making it that like, hey, if we want you to be an actual beastmaster, I like the fantasy idea. I like it, okay? It's not a bad idea. I think they might. This explains why they did the balance patch for a lot of the pets a while ago. They wanted this fantasy to be a thing, and I think it's a good change. I think it might need adjustment to make it worthwhile, but definitely nice. So, reduce the cooldown of pet swapping with a defeated pet from 60 seconds to 35 seconds in PvE and PvP. Okay, not bad. I think when your pet died, it was kind of trash. I think in PvE, your pet rarely ever dies, apart from if there's like weird interactions with overlapping mechanics will into the shot pets. So an example of this in Fractals is if the spread mechanic happens where both of the spreads hit the ranger pet will just straight up die. And then the ranger pet sometimes used to take damage from like puddles and stuff, but doesn't anymore. So overall, I think that's a good change. It's going to be interesting to see how it feels, but we'll see. Savage Slash increased the power coefficient from 3.0 to 3.3 in PvE, and they're basically just increasing the greatsword coefficient because they're removing the trait. Pretty milquetoast changes for Ranger, apart from maybe like they want the Beast Mastery trait to be worth it. But honestly, an interesting changes. Revenant. Okay, guys. It's time for our baby, our loved ones, to see if it gets fixed. Okay. If we get absolutely slapped. Conduits have gained improved access to team support capabilities with several reworked traits. Found purpose, granting boons to allies, whereas numerous gifts is triggered. And shared wisdom now grants boons to allies when legendary entity skills are used. In addition, Trident skills now gain new bonuses while the legendary entity stance is the active legend. Nice. So not many people know this, but basically Trident basically got different things based on what your legends were. It was things like whenever you were, say for example, assassin, you did vulnerability, you know, stuff along those lines. It's kind of like milquetoast, not really that interesting, but kind of good. The skill now inflicts slow on enemies struck with the legendary entity stance equipped. Okay, so basically now this just makes it that you do slow instead. That is a very strong thing to have. Slow is a very strong condition. So basically now, damn, Revenant underwater combat is going to do insane slow uptime. The only thing I'm worried about is now condition conduit underwater is going to feel very bad because you would use the skill basically underwater and you would do a lot of condition damage. Now, instead of doing torment when you're the Condy build, because the way it used to function was basically it would just copy the effect of the other legend you had equipped. So when you had demon equipped, both of the time you would be inflicting torment. So whenever you were in demon attuned or when you were conduit attuned. Kind of a nerf to the underwater Condy one, but it's not a huge deal. Rift of Pain, the skill now creates an ethereal combo field if the legendary entity stance is attuned. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. It's pretty cool. That's basically, you know, Chaos Aura. Reckoning Blast, the skill now inflicts slow on enemies while struck while legendary entity stance. I'm just going to call it Conduit. Torrential Mist is now, okay, so all of them just pretty much inflict slow. Nice to upkeep slow, but it's kind of like I'd be scared to fight a Conduit underwater now, in all honesty. Like having slow inflicted on you is kind of painful. Release potential. All release potential skills now use the same weapon type scaling when calculating damage, regardless of the weapon type equipped. This is basically when you were dual wielding, I think it was a different calculation than when you were like wielding one great weapon, like a great sword or like a hammer. They're basically just standardizing it out. It's a good change. Boundless Knowledge. This trait has been reworked and renamed to Shared Wisdom. This trait now grants boons to allies around you whenever you use a legendary entity skill, depending on which skill was used. So this is gain boons whenever you gain maximum affinity. Pretty milquetoast. I don't think you really used that much. It was kind of plain, kind of boring. I still don't believe, right? Like if I go to the trait lines, to run this trait, right, you would have to run it over conductive augments. Conductive augments is just S tier trait. Like it's way too strong. I don't see you like. I think that conductive augments should have just been baseline. Like gaining affinity while using weapon skills is so strong and so important when a lot of the damage comes from affinity. Perpetual Wisdom. This trait has now been renamed to Found Purpose. The trait no longer causes Cosmic Wisdom to be active indefinitely or reduce the passive energy regeneration. Instead, in addition to its previous effects of triggering numerous gifts when you swap legends, it also grants boons to allies around you whenever you trigger its effect. Okay, so basically now Conduit has way more energy than what it used to have. Basically, you now no longer lose the regeneration, which is nice. Although, now I wonder what Cosmic Wisdom's going to do. Okay. Maybe they're going to make it only active for a duration. It's going to be interesting to see. This isn't quite clear exactly on what they're doing. I'm assuming this still means that you will permanently have the Cosmic Wisdom active on. Maybe like a lesser version. But I don't know. It's not very clear. Because saying it's not active indefinitely is kind of trash. I hope it's not like how it worked previously where you had to opt in to turning it on. If it is, it might be all right. But I don't know if it's going to keep the legend you have at the start. Because the way it worked in pre-release was you would basically run Perpetual Wisdom. And say, for example, you started a fight. You would always want to run, if you were Condi, you would want to start channeling Perpetual Wisdom inside Demon, then swap your legends manually so that you had the buff from Demon. But now the way Perpetual Wisdom works is whenever you legend swap, it changes the buff to be of whatever your active legend is. That doesn't seem to have changed, so we'll see how that functions. They might look at changing it. Twin Moon Sweep. While Legendary Centaur's stance is equipped, the skill now removes conditions from allies around you and a fragment instead of removes conditions from allies around you instead of just yourself. It also generates a fragment. The number of conditions removed no longer increases based on the enemy struck. This isn't really much of a change. Let's be honest, no one is running anything other than Demon or Shiro. They really need to look at how the warrior, which is the dwarf stance, the dwarf is tied to warrior. They really need to look at that, and they need to look at the centaur, because currently they're just not viable in PvE. Numerous gift. The boons granted by Legendary Assassin stance has been changed from quickness to fury in all game modes. The boon granted by equipping Legendary Entity stance has been changed from fury to quickness in all game modes. Wow. The third, minor traits of other specialization you have equipped to improve the effectiveness. Okay. So basically, damn, okay, this is kind of weird. Ah, so this just buffs the traits. Oh, that's kind of interesting. No, that's a interesting change. It'll be interesting to see how the numbers play out on that, but Beguiling Haze reduced increased the radius from 120 to 180. Yo, Conduit didn't get nerfed, guys. Look at that. We got through it. Conduit didn't get touched, dude. 58k DPS. Okay, guys, if you are a Conduit enjoyer, shut up. Don't say anything to Anet. Okay, we're gonna be learning it. We're gonna be benching it. Okay, we missed the nerf wave, bro. Everything else just got its cheeks thunderclapped. Okay, and us, we got ignored. Let's go. Conduit's still insane damage on the Condi, bro. Let's do this. You're afraid of the Conduit rotation. Honestly, if you're afraid of the Conduit rotation, what I would recommend is changing the traits to, instead of the additional energy on Legend Swap for the Condi build, to change to the trait that basically is called Song of the Mists, which basically, whenever you swap legends, you do an AoE explosion around you. That would do a condition based on whatever legend you have equipped. This is for Conduit, so Legendary Entity is the same as the equipped legend. So it would be basically, you would inflict torment and stuff. Pretty nice, pretty standard. Thief, we've gotten feedback that certain defensive artifacts did not work well as an actual defensive tool. As a result, we've retooled several of the artifacts to have improved defense and support capabilities, increasing their radius and improving their ability to affect several allies or enemies at once. Imprising Artifact Minor trait has also received a small tweak to improve personal survivability by reducing incoming striking damage and condition damage, while the Antiquary has Barrier. Antiquary. All artifacts now use the same weapon type scaling when calculating damage regardless of the weapon type equipped. Nice. Just standardizing stuff, making it simpler for them to scale. Metal Legion Guitar increased the radius from 180 to 240. Okay, so basically they just increased the radius that it does damage. It was a very melee skill. Probably a good change. I really did wish that they made this like a range skill and like added a music projectile to it or something, but still decent change. You want this on power, it's still very trash on the Condi builds. You really do not want this on the Condi. Exalted Hammer increased the radius from 180 to 240. This skill now additionally grants protection to nearby allies. So this one basically you just leapt to an area and you healed your allies. Now it's just going to give prod as well. I don't think you're really going to use this unless you're playing the Alacrity build and you need to give Alacrity and you don't have anything else. Chalk Shield increased the radius from 180 to 240. The skill now additionally grants barrier to nearby allies with each pulse. Nice, so now you have a way of giving yourself barrier. This skill was extremely strong, the Chalk Shield. So seeing that they're buffing it further, it's like an S tier skill. Hollow Dancer Decoy. The skill now additionally pulses might to nearby ally and grants additional might inferior to allies when it self-destructs. Nice, they're giving more boon access to the class. Not bad. I am in favor of it. Zephyrite Sun Crystal increases the radius from 180 to 240. The skill no longer breaks stun. The skill now blinds opponents that are struck and removes conditions from nearby allies. The passive ability of this skill has been changed. When you use a weapon skill that costs initiative, remove conditions from yourself. That's fine. So basically just making it a cleanse for your allies and then just making it not a stun break, which is probably for the better. Enterprising Artifacts. This trait additionally grants you barrier when using an artifact skill. You take reduced strike and condition damage when you have barrier and this trait is equipped. Well, I mean, it's always equipped. It's a minor trait, right? Like, you always have it. So basically now you're able to give yourself more barrier and it's pretty good. Possessive Horror. Artifacts grant barrier and boons to allies when used. Offensive and defensive artifacts grants different boons. So this is the Alacrity trait. It doesn't say it here, but this is basically what you ran if you wanted to run alacrity. They recently made it so that you give alacrity whether you use a defense or an offensive artifact, which could change. But now they're making it grow on barrier as well. I think the issue is people still aren't going to be playing alacrity antiquary. The reason is the boon range is trash. They need to fix the boon range if they want to make this usable. The boon range on this is very small, so it's only really effective on like very, very, very good groups and a select few fights, right? Like the range is 240. 240 is very, very small. Almost all boons in the game are at 360. You want the range of this to be 360. They need to change this, or no one is running Alacrity Antiquary. It is not a friendly build to play. I think Anet needs to fix this and basically make it that, hey, this is now 360. Or buff it further if you want, but I do believe that like it kind of really makes Antiquary suffer because Antiquary is not mobile. Antiquary always uses the elite skill, which is the script that basically give you a random artifact. And basically you cannot move out of that AoE. If you move out of that AoE, you stop getting basically the artifacts, and that's not good. So Anet does need to increase the range on this because Antiquary does really, really suffer at the moment. Warrior, our final spec. Fast Hands has historically been a trait. Actually, wait, let me go back to Thief. I find Thief very strange. Thief is underperforming in a lot of game modes. Like if I go to Wingman, right? And I go to fancy stats. I believe that Thief is one of the least played, right? If we go to profession popularity. Now I know this is kind of hot selecting for people that would play it because obviously you have to actually upload your logs to Wingman, which is a very small subsect of the community. But remember, whenever you play with someone like me, what it does is it includes people. So if we look here, this is all of the specs and what we have 3.84% like all era specters, you know? I do wish you could zoom this in. But if we look at the current patch, Antiquary, 1.8% play. Spectre, 1.7% play. Deadeye, 1.6% play. Daredevil, 1.5% play. It really needs to be buffed. Like, they really need to look at Thief, man. Like, Thief is just struggling at the moment. Like, for Thief to have like these low play rates, like compare this to even Warrior. Warriors is also pretty low, I guess, like 1 point something percent, 1 point something percent. It's pretty low. Chrono is disgusting. Virtuoso is disgusting, like 5%, 9%. Ritual is really loved by people. You know, like Evoker's like 2.6, you know, Catalyst is 1.4, Weaver's 1. Weaver really needs help. 1%. Like it's really bad. Like even Hollowsmith, dude. Like this is what I said earlier about Hollowsmith really needs help, man. Like it's at Hollowsmith might actually be the least played spec in the entire game. They need to have a look at Hollowsmith, man. It's struggling. Scrapper just does what it does better in a power sense. Mech does what it does better in a Conti sense. Like, it has no place at the moment. They need to fix Hollowsmith. You know, Gale Shot's at a low play rate. What is this? Untamed is also very bad at the moment. Like, yeah. They need to look at what they're doing with Ranger and look at fixing them. Conduit, man, we're pumping. Look at that. Look at that damage stats. Vindicator's gone down quite a bit. Renegade is looking very sad. Herald is still good. Herald, despite how weak it is still performing extremely well. But yeah, these need to be looked at. Guardian is actually surprisingly looking fine, and so is the Warrior for the most part. I think under 1% play rate is like, it's on life support. Anet needs to save it now. It needs life support ASAP. All right, back to a Warrior. Fast Hands has, you know what, actually, I do wish that you could separate this by how they were played, so if they were boon or DPS, but for the most part, we ignore it for now. Warrior. Fast Hands has historically been a trait at the core of many Warrior builds. Warrior has overly reliance on taking the discipline trade line specialization to gain access to this, stifling other options. Warrior will now have the reduced weapon swap cooldown as a profession feature. So baseline, Warrior is going to have the lowest weapon swap rate in the entire game. Just baseline. That is insanely cool. Great change. I love that. I love that Anet is making that change, because Warrior is meant to be the trait that's like, oh, we can use weapons, right? So this is going to enable stuff for Warrior in a lot of ways. That's just going to make it better as an overall build. I think it's good. Warriors now have a reduced weapon swap cooldown. Yeah, okay, we did that. That's good change overall for Warrior. I'm happy with that. Like, that's a very good change. Anet, please add stuff like this that makes the specs interact with stuff uniquely, right? Like, even go crazy. Say that, oh, Ranger Pet by default does additional damage, you know? Like, I know you worked it into a trait, but for the most part, it's good. We'll discuss the profession balance and stuff afterwards, I think, because I do want to reply to what you're saying, but I don't want to sidetrack too much. Staff has been the go-to weapon for all warriors in competitive modes, despite being a support weapon. Featuring multiple movement skills, healing, and a block, this weapon provided too much self-defense, and the blocking skill bullet counter is being removed, while we increase defensive options for warrior outside of the staff. Nice, that's a good choice there, kind of like reworking it a bit. Warriors will now always have a 5-second weapon swap cooldown. That is huge for warriors, right? Like, this enables people to do a lot of things. I think the only thing that it might be a bit weird for is on the what's it called, Blade Sworn front. It might be a bit weird, but I think it's still a good change. Blade Trail, the skill now immobilizes its enemy instead of crippling them, reducing the cast time from 0.72 seconds to 0.6 seconds, reduce the aftercast. Basically, they're just making the skill a bit faster. This is going to be a overall buff to the power DPS build in PvE, because this is used in the, I believe, the Greatsword variant of the build for Berserker, because you want to generate enough energy. So that's pretty good. Linebreaker, the skill no longer applies to Aegis in PvP and World v World. Bullet Catcher, the skill now this has been removed and replaced by Defiant Roar. Okay, what does this do? Defiant Roar is unleash Defiant Roar, healing allies and grants them resolution. Okay, so basically they're removing the block and just adding the, making it the aftercast, like the flip over skill. I think they need to maybe potentially buff Defiant Roar. It's kind of meh without the block, but overall decent. Balance Start, reduce the recharge time from 50 seconds to 40 seconds in World v World and PvP. Okay. No, not much of a comment. I don't really play too much World v World or PvP. Giving a bit more defensive option to warriors after we've nerfed their defensive skill on the staff. Fast Hands, this trait has now grants swiftness when weapon swapping in combat instead of reducing the weapon swap cooldown. I don't think this is going to affect too much for Warrior. The reason I say that is that Warrior usually runs a trait where you move faster when you use melee weapons. I think in the straight line specifically. So, but I think it's overall a good change to have. I think maybe they might look at adding additional functionality to this. I think they need to change this a bit, but that's just my feelings. Savage Instincts increase the duration from 1 second to 1.25 seconds in PvP. This is basically increase the stun when you activate Berserk. Okay, making a bit more of a burst window from when you go into Berserk mode. Interesting. Dead or Alive, heal yourself and gain Blood Awakening when you enter in Berserk mode. Okay, don't really see it used much. Maybe in PvP they'll use it. Kind of needs a rework overall in my opinion. Eternal Champion, increased stability and endurance when entering Berserk mode. Traits that trigger when entering Berserk mode also trigger when exiting Berserk mode. You can now exit Berserk mode early. Increase the stability duration from 2 seconds to 3 seconds in PvP only. Eternal Champion, I believe you only really used on the heal Berserker skill, like as like something that functionally is used. I think overall, maybe they should just make it that this stability is now granted to allies. I think it would be a healthy change to the build to make it, give it a bit more like use, you know? I think that'd be fun, but obviously depends on how Anet wants to balance that. Spellbreaker, Featherfoot Great. This skill now also grants protection. Okay, this meditation is not really used. I still don't see it being used, but maybe it now has defensive use. Slow Counter. Full Counter applies Cripple and Slow. This trait has been reworked and renamed to Resilient Counter. Full Counter now gives resistance. Okay, so now they give themselves resistance. This might be a bit terrifying in PvP. But overall, I think it's a decent choice. I think it's definitely going to be scary in the competitive game modes. Like locking down a Spellbreaker now, already it was really hard to do. It's going to be almost impossible now. Revenge Counter, this trait has been reworked and renamed Resolute Counter. Full Counter now removes conditions from you and heals you. Okay. So Full Counter deals additional damage and grants resistance. Copy conditions on yourself to targets you hit with Full Counter. That's kind of sad that they removed that. I kind of liked Revenge Counter as an idea, but I guess it was a bit annoying to balance in PvP. No, that's all right. There was some things that I wanted to go over. Overall, I think there is some stuff missing from this balance patch. But yeah, it's like a lot of the things in here look really good. How's your ping look from Oz? Basically, you just dodge early. So you just have to be a bit preemptive with dodges when you got higher ping. The raid player base is about 5% of the player base in Guild Wars 2. This is correct, yes. I do agree with you. It is about 5% of the player base in Guild Wars 2. However, a lot of the people that do PvE, right, they get their builds from people that are in the raid community, right? Like, they're informed by a lot of people that like make raid builds and that sort of stuff. I think like Hollowsmith being not really usable in a PvE sense from like a raid perspective should be even more worrying to Anet in a PvE perspective for just the average player. It means that the class just doesn't perform too well. It needs attention in damage department. Even with all the support you can give it, it doesn't do that much. I think it's probably going to need some reworking. Like the thing is, we shouldn't use this as like this traits of like, oh, what's played, you know, as like basically the be all and end all. But it should definitely be like informative, right? Like even if we use this for strikes, like the percentage here for like Spectre is really bad. Ritualist is like very strong. I just think it's because it's a comfortable build now. I think they maybe need to tweak the damage on Ritualist a bit. Maybe even the healing to make it a bit weaker. I think they need to hit Ritualist one more time. but I think Ritualist is in a very strong spot. Mech is very highly represented, even though it's not that strong of a build. You can out damage it if you're good on the other classes. But for the most part, I definitely think that Thief needs some attention, specifically for Deadeye, Daredevil. You know, like I think these stats are also heavily skewed because we have people in the community like Left, like Zalil, you know, people like Iskaril that will pretty much always play Thief, right? Like even if Thief isn't the best in like what it could be, Daredevil just is not really performing. Like if I was to go to Fractals, like the stats for Daredevil is like even worse, right? Like it's just not great. Deadeye I can understand being that low in Fractals, you know, like I'm not saying that it should be the highest, but I definitely think that like there needs some attention to Daredevil because it's just underperforming inside of raids, Fractals, and strikes. I think when I say that, I mean Daredevil in the power sense. I think currently the stats for Daredevil would look a lot worse if we were to remove the Condi Daredevil, which is in a decent spot. If Condition Daredevil didn't exist, these stats would look even more abysmal. So I definitely need some attention. You know, there's some things like, okay, Scrapper stats are mainly power Scrapper. Yes, Condi Scrapper does exist. It's not really accessible very well to play with, right? So it definitely needs to be adjusted. But overall, it's not too bad. I feel like some quality of life for the classes would be good because I think for the average player, most specs are pretty good. For the endgame player balance, yeah, it's kind of cooked. I think they do need to add some quality of life. I think after costs are really trash. They need to remove them from the game. I think stuff like, say, for example, if you're using Greatsword on a Necro, you want to cancel the after cost on the Greatsword 5 as much as you can. Should probably be removed. I'm not a huge fan of it. To get higher number on Ritualist, you're basically canceling that 5 skill. Most people aren't going to be getting high damage on Ritualist. But it still does overperform a bit in the damage department. I think it's currently sitting at, what, 45k on the DPS. This as well, it does a lot of healing, gives a lot of boons, gives protection, you know, does good CC. It does a lot of everything, even while doing decent damage as a DPS. But overall, I think Anet is doing good with the balancing. I do like to see the changes they're making, specifically to Warrior. Is good. Just closing out my thoughts. Power Engineer is going to be extremely strong in the next update if they don't adjust stuff, because this is insanely powerful. Catalyst, interesting, not really changes too much. Ellie is pretty much unchanged for the most part from a PvE perspective. Maybe they make Spear viable. Don't doubt it. Guardian, minor adjustments, doesn't really seem too much. Mesmer, CC nerf is definitely needed. I think making the improved alacrity baseline is kind of scary. I think Mesmer, Chronomancer specifically, is improved alacrity is not part of Chronomancer. I think improved alacrity is way too strong. They should remove it. I think that Continuum Split makes heal Chronomancer already too strong as a healer, just because of the baseline utility that Chronomancer brings. I think the nerf to precog well is good. Probably a healthy change. The Necromancer, I like to see that they're looking to change some of the Necromancer traits. I do wish that they looked at Blighter's Boon inside of Reaper, because it's not used in any of the builds, Power or Condi. PvP, PvE, World v World, it's just a very bad boon. Very bad trait. I think they could look at potentially giving it, you know, alacrity whenever you chill someone or do something along those lines. I think it would be good change to the build overall. Also, the change to Nightfall, I believe, something I forgot to mention is I believe this is low-key a heavy nerf to the Condi Reaper, because I believed you needed to apply blind a lot more frequently to basically get the maximum value out of the chill. Sorry, blind changes the chill due to a trait change, and then chill bleeds foes. So you lose a lot of bleeding due to the Nightfall change. But no one really plays Condition Reaper apart from like a select few people. Antiquary, they need to buff the boon range on Possessive Hoarder. Overall, that needs adjustment. Warrior, can't really complain about the changes. Overall, they seem pretty good. I think Paragon might need a bit more of a damage buff, but we'll see because I haven't really seen too many Paragon players. And that, guys, is the balance patch for the 13th of January. I am excited for it. I will probably, now that I see they're not going to be nerfing Conduit, I am probably going to be benching some Conduit, gonna learn it, get better at the build, because I'm currently being kind of freeballing it a bit, kind of feeling the build out, just YOLOing the build basically. But if you really want to Giga Sweat, Conduit's looking like the class to be, which is pretty good. It's kind of hard to play, but if you can put that aside and are able to, you know, utilize the energy and potentially look at how you can use your energy better, you can get a lot out of that class, a lot of damage. Even if it is very much of a leech class, like it doesn't really offer much to your group, apart from the insane damage. And yeah, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks.